be excused. The elderly are excused for many reasons. They don't have like a cold. Their sickness is old age in general. So a lot of the body is not capable of handling the regular day-to-day requirements for fasting. If you are able, then you can 100% fast. But if you are not able, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not require it. Who else would be in this group? The pregnant. The women who are pregnant or breastfeeding, possibly. For breastfeeding, it's her decision. And maybe she should consult a medical professional to ensure that it is not going to be something of a risk for her or her child if she were to fast throughout the day. Because the pregnant women and the breastfeeding women, they need nutrients for the young baby who is growing, who requires care and looking after from their mother. But of course, if there is any harm to the child, then they should immediately skip fasting and they're exempt from it. If fasting possesses some sort of harm to you, some sort of harm, physical or health-wise, whatever that may be, that requires some sort of license, I would say, a rukhsa from a scholar who would be able to help you with your case, and then you would be able to skip the fasting if that was the case for you. Number 3, the third requirement is residency, iqama. Because fasting is not obligated on a traveler. A traveler may fast if they wish to do so, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes an exception for those who are traveling. And you see it as a rahmah. It is a major rahmah. Why? Because the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said traveling, shatrun min al-adab, is a piece of punishment. It's almost like punishment traveling. It's long and it takes a long time and the person is not sure where they are and they don't know where to get their food from, and they may be a little confused of what times the prayers are and what the direction of the qibla is, and if they leave their stuff behind, who's going to watch it while they're fasting or praying or doing other things. And so while you're traveling, a lot of it is you trying to ensure your safety and the safety of those who are with you until you get to your destination, or at least a place of rest. Then there are those who are neither obligated to fast, nor is it valid in their fast. This first group includes those who are, like for example, mentally incapacitated. Someone who doesn't have their mental facilities. Someone who is insane or unconscious. Why would we say this? Because the person who is insane, for example, they don't know right from wrong. They may not even know who they are or understand what's happening around them. They're excused from prayer. They're excused from many things. Right? The deen is not going to hold them accountable for their current state, and it is a rahmah from Allah. The second group, which are those who are unconscious, let's say you're having a good time, it's at night time, and then something happens, and all you see is a fist, and boom, you get knocked out right before Fajr. Boom, you're sleeping on the ground. Everybody says, ooh, they take pictures. What happened? And you're sleeping. You fasting is not obligated upon you at that current point in time. You don't even know what time it is. You're completely knocked out. Until you actually come back into consciousness, that's when we're actually going to tell you, okay, your fast is required or not required, or you need to make up a day, or so on. It's possible that you are in a coma, may Allah protect us, for the entire month of Ramadan. It's a possibility, right? And so for that very reason, right, we don't say that the person who is unconscious or insane is required to fast. They're excused completely. Who else is from this exempt group? And it's not valid from them. Women who are on their hayd, who are on their menstruation or postnatal bleeding. They're neither obligated to fast, nor is their fast valid. And if a woman is pure from menstruation at Fajr, she must fast, even if she has not yet performed ghusl. Okay? However, if she doubts whether she became pure before or after Fajr, she fasts that day and she makes it up after Ramadan out of precaution. If she becomes pure, meaning like she's off from her menstruation, after Fajr, her fast is invalid and she is not required to refrain from eating or drinking for the rest of the day. Like let's say she had 50% of a day, she just continues the rest of the day and then she'll fast the next day. Okay? Because she missed the time frame for when the fast is required. Number 3 is entering the time of fasting. Meaning that the fast of Ramadan is not obligated until the month of Ramadan itself. Can we in the masjid go like, okay, you know what, Ramadan is like a month away and we like how the time is very short right now, so we're just going to fast in January and we're going to call that the fast of Ramadan. No, we cannot do that. It's haram. You're not allowed to do that. Therefore, the month of Ramadan is the only time that we can actually fast in it. And it's crucial that we're very cautious to the timing of Fajr. As soon as you hear the adhan of Fajr, all of the food needs to come out of your mouth. If you're enjoying your bagel, and then you hear Allahu Akbar, remove the food from your mouth. You want to rinse it out with some water, do so, but no more food and drink as soon as you hear that adhan. If someone eats while uncertain whether Fajr has begun, and they realize later that Fajr began, they must make up their fast. It is even more problematic for people who continue eating after the adhan is called. And unfortunately, there were some people who spread this opinion that you could eat after the adhan is called, until the adhan is done. That's not correct. One imam could take 10 minutes to make the adhan, and the other imam can take 30 seconds. How does that make any sense? The time for one fasting begins is at the start of the exact second that adhan is supposed to go off. That adhan could have been called a mile away, 5 miles away, next to you in the house. But as soon as that time frame hits, khalas, now it's time for Fajr. With the phones and the timings on the phones, sometimes there are some inaccuracies. So make sure that you follow up with the masjid for the exact Fajr time. You go to your local masjid and you ask them what is the time for Fajr. And that's the time that you follow. The reason for that being, the imam is following that time. The imam is following that time. طيب. So, as a recap, the people who are obligated to fast are every adult. What is every adult? Meaning you've passed the age of puberty. Everyone who is not traveling, and everyone who has no other physical, any other illnesses or things that would impede on their fasting. Okay? Any conditions that would impede on their fasting. And we mentioned those who are exempt, such as the elderly or the sick. If you have any illness, you have the flu, a cold, you're excused from fasting. If you want to continue fasting, you're free to do so. There's no issue. It's just that from those individuals who may have some sort of medical need, it is between them and Allah what they can do. And Allah Azza wa Jal does not give you a sin for you missing out on the day of fasting. You simply make it up later after Ramadan. طيب. With that being said, fasting and siyam has two pillars. Fasting and siyam has two pillars. The first is the intention. There isn't a single act of worship in Islam that doesn't require for you to intend it. You have to intend it. I intend to pray dhuhr in your heart. Excuse me. And in the case of fasting, I intend to fast. You intend to fast with the purpose of seeking closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You intend to fast in obligation, in accordance to the obligation of Islam. Not because your father told you to. Not because your wife told you to, or your sister, or whatever it is. You're fasting for Allah. That's it. When do we make the intention? The intention must be made at night, any time from Maghrib until Fajr. If Fajr enters and the person has not made the intention, their fast is invalid. This is similar to Salah. I don't know if I'm going to pray Dhuhr or Asr. I'll just see how it goes. And then you come and you go, Allahu Akbar. Let me pick what Salah this is. No, it's invalid. Khalas. Done. How do you do that? You can't do such a thing. Likewise, Siyam is the same thing. I don't know if I'm going to fast. Ooh. You can't do such a thing. So you have to have the intention before you enter into the Salah, into the Siyam. Niyyah. Yeah, niyyah. In Arabic is niyyah. Niyyah, intention is the same word. For Imam Malik, he said the intention once at the start of Ramadan suffices for the entire month. The intention once at the beginning of the month of Ramadan suffices for the entire month. Meaning, by default, let's say February 28th, it's estimated, Allahu Alam, it's estimated that that's going to be the first day of fasting. Correct? So, or like the first day of the first night of Ramadan. So at that particular night, that's when after Maghrib time, I'm going to make the intention, I'm fasting for the month of Ramadan, beginning at Fajr time. Perfect. That's it. I don't need to keep reflecting on it. Imam Malik says you don't need to keep reflecting on it. That's it. As long as you have the intention for Ramadan, you have the intention for Ramadan. There's no need to keep repeating it every day. The other ulama said, no, it's required that you repeat it every day. Walakin, once is sufficient. That's it. If a person sleeps before Fajr and wakes up after, what is the ruling for that person? If they made the intention before they slept, their fast is valid. The 28th, February 28th, right? It is the last night of Sha'ban. Ramadan is the next day. What do? I went and I slept, and for whatever reason, I slept at Asr time. Did not wake up all the way until like the next day. Okay? If I had the intention before I went to sleep that I was fasting for Ramadan the next day, it's sufficient. If I didn't have that intention, then I need to make up that particular day. Okay? I have to make up that day. I fast that day and I make up that day after Ramadan. You're not sinful, you just need to make it up. The second condition, or the second pillar of fasting, is to abstain from any nullifier of fasting. Any nullifier of fasting. Boys, really quick. What nullifies your fast? Eating and drinking. A guy, like a random American off the street, he says, hey, you Muslims, what do you need in order to fast? Like, what breaks your fast? And you tell him what you can't do in Ramadan. Eating and drinking. So these are the two most known. Food and drink. After that, and this concerns the older men, those who are married, and for those who, may Allah protect us, but they may fall into the sin, sexual intercourse. We abstain from this during the whole time that we're fasting. Anything that takes the place of food, drink, or intercourse, this is something that we are not allowed to have, such as like an IV or something of that like, that would give you some nutrition throughout the day, right? That you have directly injected into you, that would take the place of food. Let's say you had like a tube down your throat, and somebody just stuffed hamburgers down that tube the whole day. Here's more hamburgers. Technically, you're not eating. The tube is feeding you. Did I break my fast? The Imam will say, yes, you broke your fast. That breaks your fast, okay? So anything that takes the place of food or drink or the act of eating and drinking, all of this breaks the fast. The fasting person must also avoid any intentional vomiting. An intentional vomit, not an accidental vomit. You know, if you accidentally vomit, you know what you have? A sickness. You know what you're excused from? Fasting. So you've eliminated the need at that very moment. I think you need to go to a doctor. Don't worry about fasting. You're sick, okay? But if you intentionally vomit, that's a whole other story, right? In addition to that, any intake through the nose or mouth that leads to the stomach. Somebody thinks they're very smart. They take 2 tubes, they put them up their nose, and they breathe in water. Some guy, it happens. People think they're intelligent. They can break the rules. It happens, right? The fuqaha, they think of these things. What happens if he snorts it up? Khalas, broke your fast. Any acts that break the fast in general that are similar to this. So when we think of this, abstaining from anything that breaks your fast and having the intention itself, that's what's required for fasting. If we think of the nullifiers of fasting, it gets a little bit deeper than that. So it begins with vomiting intentionally. That's understood. But what about the entry of liquid into the throat? Because there are different types of liquids, and not everything is a food item. A liquid differs from a solid in this particular ruling. Whether it intentionally or unintentionally, it invalidates the fast if it goes through the throat. The jurists, they use the precise term wusul, or arrival, rather than introduction, or isal, to include both deliberate and accidental entry. So, for example, there was that very funny meme where this guy, he asks a sheikh, and he says, you know, sheikh, I slipped and I fell, and then a piece of shawarma fell into my mouth, and some hummus fell into my mouth, and then some bread somehow got into my mouth, and then some pickles, and then some Sprite, you know, or tahini, or whatever it is. Like, he just describes a full meal, and the sheikh is like shocked. He's like, what kind of question is this, right? That man has broken his fast. Intentionally or unintentionally. Intentionally or unintentionally. Okay? This ruling applies regardless of whether the liquid entered through the mouth, nose, ears, eyes, or even the pores of the head. It includes medications, ear and eye drops, or kuhl, or any substance based on normal experience that reaches the throat if used after Fajr and before Maghrib. Okay? If you have particular medications that you cannot miss out on through the day, then you take that before suhoor and after iftar. And you speak with your doctor about those medications. You speak to your doctor about those medications. If you're someone who cannot skip your medication in the middle of the day, guess what you are? You're sick and excused from fasting. You see how that works? So it's not really complicated. Okay? Right? You have some sort of excuse. Right? But oftentimes, you can kind of push the timing of your medication a little bit, and you should be just fine. If a fasting person knows from habit that such substances will reach the throat before sunset, it's better to avoid them during fasting hours. However, if they usually do not reach the throat, there is no harm in using them. There is also a possibility that a person, if just before sunset and the taste, if someone feels the taste of eye drops in their throat. Have you guys ever taken eye drops before? So everything that is like nose, eyes, because this area, or where the tear duct is, all of that falls back into the back of your throat. That's why they're called ears, eyes, and nose, throat, ENT doctors. Because all of that is like this part of your face and your sinuses, and all of it's connected. So what the Malikis say, or what a lot of the fuqaha say, is because of the fact that those liquids, they can possibly enter into the back of your throat, this would break your fast. And so you have to be very careful with that. If you do not feel it come into the back of your throat, you never taste it come into the back of your throat, because I promise you, you will taste medication. If it's a liquid medication, you'll taste the burning or some bitterness that comes with that. If you don't taste it or whatever it is, and there's no risk of it going to the back of your throat, there's no issue whatsoever. I was going to get to that, yeah. I was just going to get to that now. So brushing the teeth is fine as long as it doesn't enter the back of your throat. Mouthwash, rinsing, all of that stuff, as long as you don't swallow it. That's easy. So you can brush away, do whatever you need to with your brush, and alhamdulillah, all of that should be fine. The third matter is liquid into the stomach. Any liquid that goes through the mouth, it would invalidate the fast. There's even some medical procedures that may go through the rectum or the rear of the person's body. Okay? That would also break the fast. Okay, so if somebody was getting some sort of treatment in that case, and it went there and it went through the stomach, and what the result was going through the stomach, then khalas, that would break the fast itself. If a solid object reaches only the throat but does not continue to the stomach, the fast remains valid. The fast remains valid. What is an example of this? Medical instruments. Medical instruments. Like for example, like the dentist, they're examining your throat or whatever it is, or maybe you go to the doctor and they use those like a tongue depressor or something to look at the back of the throat. Okay, any substance that, or any of those tools, they wouldn't necessarily break the fast because they're not actually going to the stomach. Medical instruments, endoscopes or catheters inserted through the mouth or nose but not reaching the stomach, all of those would be allowed. Inhaling food vapors breaks the fast. You go and you open up the pot, and there's all of that water vapor that comes when you open up, like you ever make pasta, and woof, all of that comes out, or maybe a very good biryani, and everything comes up. You have to be very careful, right? So the water vapor, directly inhaling that, because that's water that's going to hit the back of your throat, and by extension, it's going to go down into your stomach, even if it's a little bit. So the ulama, they said, avoid that. Very thick bukhur, like oud, when you burn it, very thick, like the Arabic gum, it makes a very thick smoke. Inhaling that would break the fast. If it's unintentional, there is no qada. If it's unintentional, meaning like you opened it and then you turned, you didn't mean to like go directly in, but you turned and it just came into your face like that, then it's unintentional. Intentional inhaling of that vapor, you wanted for whatever reason to get all of that in your face, then that would break the fast. If a person vomits naturally and uncontrollably, then has the ability to spit it out yet chooses to swallow it, their fast is broken. Swallowing it unintentionally does not break the, vomiting unintentionally does not break the fast, but it may be an indication of illness. The same applies to like acid reflux. You know acid reflux? You young guys don't know, but everyone else knows, right? So you have a nice juicy burger or whatever, you know. I know in Ramadan I hear the acid reflux. So all of that comes up, right? And oftentimes it's like vomit, but it's like very hard to, it's heartburn, it's very hard to keep it down. Okay? So if a person vomits naturally, we said it uncontrollably, then has the ability to spit it out, and if they choose to swallow it, that fast is broken. The same applies if you have acid reflux, which has the same ruling as vomit. If it can be expelled, but is swallowed deliberately, the fast is broken. Meaning like if you can spit it out, spit it out. If you are able to spit it out and it gets to your mouth and then you swallow it back in, that breaks your fast. If it gets stuck here, sometimes it gets stuck here, it doesn't break the fast. It's only breaking the fast when it comes into your mouth and then you go, I need to have that burger again, and you swallow it. Okay? Some people, they ask about saliva or mucus. That doesn't break the fast, even if you do it intentionally. All right. Now, with the fact that you can have your fast broken, and we've mentioned the things that break your fast. All right. Let's say we have broken our fast. What is the expiation for that? Well, first of all,
what about, let's say you got injured and a lot of blood came out? Is that
no, it doesn't break the fast. No. You might have another problem though, right? you may need to break your fast, right? Because of the loss of blood, you may need to replenish like the water and the electrolytes and the nutrients. If you continue fasting and you've lost a lot of blood, you may die. So that needs to go. You need to go to a doctor, right? So a lot of these things with the medical stuff, right? You have to kind of use your brain, like, and you know your body the best. Can I finish the day and fast? Can I not? Do I need to go to a doctor? You will most likely know that from your own self and what you can do, right? But never do something that will cause physical harm to you or something that could risk your life. Do you have a question? Yeah. Yeah.
he asked the person to finish the food that is there in the bowl. Is that an authentic hadith or what is it?
I'm not sure if it's authenticity, but the scholars, they did not operate from that hadith for a reason, right? They disagreed with that hadith because I believe it was for a specific situation for that individual. It could have been an exception. Also, depending on the language that the Prophet, peace be upon him, used, they understood from him that actually he meant the opposite. He meant for him to eat until he hears the adhan. The other thing as well is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says for us to stop eating once we see the sun rise, meaning Fajr time. Okay? So when we're evaluating what command is higher, the Quran becomes higher. Right? And sometimes, in some instances, the hadith can be higher. But in this case, the Quran is higher because we have clear nas from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah, wa iyyakum. So, with kafara. Kafara is for us to make up the fast. Oh, before we get into kafara, any form of sexual arousal which results in you releasing any white liquid from your body, this invalidates the fast. Any form. So it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual relations. It could be that you were playing around with your spouse, you looked at something you weren't supposed to, you did something to yourself that you weren't supposed to. That's haram. All of this requires for you to make up the fast. And if you do so, it's not just the fast, you also have to do kafara. We'll talk about that inshallah. So kafara, there are 5 conditions. The first is there has to be some intentionality, meaning that the act of breaking the fast must have been done deliberately. If it was accidental, then that puts us in qadha, not in kafara. Okay? If done by mistake or forgetfulness, kafara is not required. Number 2, Choice. Choice. The person must voluntarily break the fast. If they are coerced or overwhelmed by an external factor, such as somebody forced food down their throat, no kafara is required. Number 3, violation of the sanctity of Ramadan. If a person breaks the fast with an invalid excuse, they are violating the sanctity of Ramadan, which necessitates kafara. However, if someone misinterprets a ruling based on a reasonable excuse, they do not owe kafara. Such as, for example, somebody mistaken the ruling about the fruit in the bowl and wanting to finish the meal. They mistaken that and they believe that they can continue eating well after the time of Fajr. Okay? That individual, for example, if they did it by accident, they wouldn't necessarily be required to do kafara. Number 4, knowledge of the prohibition. Because if you are ignorant of what nullifies the fast, then you are excused from kafara itself, but not from making up the fast. And number 5, the act must occur in Ramadan. Of course, right? Because if I did it in Rajab or in Sha'ban or in Muharram or another month other than Ramadan, then that wouldn't be something that affects us. Okay? But in that particular case, if someone intentionally breaks a voluntary fast, a make-up fast is required. Similarly, if someone is making up a missed Ramadan fast and breaks it, only qadha, meaning they have to make it up, is required, even if they deliberately commit some sort of act that invalidates it, such as drinking or eating. So what is kafara? Kafara is a penalty. In essence, it is a penalty. We have 3 options. The first one is freeing a slave. We're not able to do that today. Okay? So, with regards to our application of fiqh today in this day and age, that's not something that we would be applying. But we mention it regardless. Number 2 is that you feed 60 poor people per day. 60. It'am sittina miskina. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, 60. So it is 1 mud of food or handful of food. For example, it would probably most likely be like a bowl of food. So let's say you go to halal guys or whatever these shawarma shops are, you tell them how much for a plate of shawarma. Okay? This will make you think twice before you do anything silly in Ramadan. This makes you think. It's a, what is it now? Like 15 bucks? It's very expensive now. It's like $18. Okay? Times 60. Times 60. You're going to think twice before you do something crazy in Ramadan. Right? The other option is that you fast for 2 consecutive months, non-stop, per day. Let's say you messed up for 10 days. 2 times 10 is what? 20 consecutive months of fasting. This is why it's not a joke. This is why when people say, I don't want to fast or this or that, it's not a joke. You owe kafara, and this is a big deal. So it's very important that you take your fasting very seriously. It is not something that is easy to do in the month of Ramadan. And then you go and you have to do it throughout the year and you're penalized for things that you could have easily avoided. This is a problem. But you also deserve it. Right? Because you made the mistake. When you get a traffic ticket and you were speeding, I deserved it. Likewise, it's the same thing. What about actions that require both qadha and kafara? Because you may have done something that requires for you to make it up and do kafara for it. I know we're extending a little bit. Inshallah, we're almost done, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. Intentionally revoking the intention of fasting. Let's say I intended to fast the first day of Ramadan. And then I said in my heart, you know what? I don't want to fast today. May Allah protect us. I don't want to fast today. I have lost the day of fasting. I'm still required to finish that day as a fasting person, make it up, and I also owe kafara for that day. Okay, I also owe kafara for that day. Why? Because I went against the sanctity of Ramadan. Simple as that. Okay? Number 2, deliberate sexual intercourse. This requires the same thing. Or any of those actions that are similar to that. Any of those actions that are similar to that are deliberate. Requires you make up that day and you owe kafara for it. Even if no white liquid comes out, the fast is still nullified if you committed intercourse. If you committed intercourse. Number 3, any intentional ejaculation. If a person deliberately drinks something, if a person intentionally, that was weird. If a person intentionally, due to direct physical contact, or maybe they're thinking and dreaming, maybe they're lingering and looking, maybe they're talking about things that would normally instigate some sort of emotion, all of these things, if it leads to you ejaculating, then khalas, then you owe qada and kafara for it. There was once a man who came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was very poor. Said, "O Prophet of Allah, I have broken my fast, and I had intercourse with my wife." And he said, "Oh, you owe kafara," alayhi salatu wasalam. He said, "I cannot owe kafara," right? And then you owe 60 days. He says, I'm poor and starving," meaning like I don't even have food to sustain myself, right? And so alayhi salatu wasalam said, "Okay, then give your money to somebody who would deserve it." And he says, there's nobody poorer than me. Alayhi salatu wasalam, he smiled, he said, "Khalas." Alayhi salatu wasalam, take the money. Then the money that you would have given, just take it for yourself. Khalas. Alayhi salatu wasalam. So there were times where there were some very varying like exceptions to the rule. And this is part of the Prophet being alayhi salatu wasalam intelligent with people and knowing who is who. Okay? Obviously somebody who can't afford, nor can afford to be hungry, nor can afford to pay for hungry. This person has both things. It doesn't apply to them. Subhanallah. It happens. Number 5 is inducing vomiting and swallowing it. If you induce vomit, then you owe kafara for that and qada as well. If it occurs naturally but the person deliberately swallows it, or some of it, they must make up the fast only, not kafara, okay? That means it's unintentional. So, one question that comes up for us is, does kafara, meaning that penalty that you have to pay, does it apply to all invalidating acts? Those 5 conditions that we said, where it has to be deliberate and it has to be in the month of Ramadan and it has to be something that goes against the sanctity of Ramadan and so on, all of those have to be a part of what you do. If a person invalidates their fast due to a valid interpretation, or kafara is not required, only qada. If they made some mistake or they had some sort of understanding or misunderstanding, then obviously they only need to make up their fast. For example, a menstruating woman, she assumes that her period will start. And if a woman has a regular cycle, where her period usually begins at midday on the 10th of each month, for example, she must continue fasting until bleeding actually starts. Okay? If she assumes her period will begin and breaks her fast before it does, she must make up the day of fast and perform kafara, even if she gets her period later that day, because she intentionally broke her fast without any sign being there for her to break her fast. A sick person who assumes that they will fall ill. This is funny, okay? Let's say you went to work one day and everybody's coughing around you. So you said, alhamdulillah, yes, I'm going to have the stomach bug in 24 hours. 24 hours comes and you start the day and you say, I have those symptoms, but I know I'm going to get sick. So when do I start not fasting? You fast. There's no issue. What if somebody has a history of illness? Meaning, every month they get sick on the 2nd day of the month. Some people, it's like this, regularly, once a month they get sick. So he knows that he's going to get sick at some time this month. He just doesn't know when. Likewise, same problem. Okay? If they break their fast and they were not sick, nor did they have any excuse for it, they owe qada and kafara. They need to make it up and pay the penalty. Another example would be someone who eats and drinks out of forgetfulness. If a fasting person forgets they are fasting and eats, and then mistakenly believes that their fast is invalid and they continue eating, only qada is required. Okay? Let's say we mentioned this before. You accidentally ate something. By accident, out of habit, you drank some water, whatever it was, and you didn't realize that it was that you were fasting and everything got confused for you at that moment. Okay? You still need to continue the rest of the day fasting. Then you need to make up the day. Why? Out of caution. Out of caution. It's very much possible that Allah will accept your day of fasting. Like out of caution, you make it up. That's it. Okay? A traveler returning before Fajr. If a traveler arrives home before Fajr and mistakenly thinks that they can still break their fast, they owe qada. Right? A person who is in a state of janaba. It's possible that you're in a state of janaba. You had halal relations with your spouse before the adhan of Fajr, and then you entered into siyam in a state of janaba. The state of janaba has nothing to do with you fasting. You fast regardless. It's not like prayer. You can fast whether in janaba or not in janaba. Okay, does anybody have any questions about acts that invalidate the fast? Excellent. Like the injections, the ruling on them is that they break the fast. The ruling on them is that they normally break the fast. Okay? And obviously if you're getting injections, this could possibly be something of a medical need. Right? So if I'm getting an IV, I don't think you should be fasting. Take the day off. Make it up later when you feel better. Because obviously if you have the IV, that means that you're depleted from water or some nutrients that you should be having in your body. Right? Usually if you're in the hospital, don't fast. Khalas, take the day off. Right?
No, but if you are fasting and like in the middle of the day, you have to go to the doctor or get an injection for some reason, would that invalidate the fast?
Typically that invalidates the fast, yes. That would invalidate the fast. So you're going to have to speak with the doctor about something where you can take it at a different time. After Maghrib, for example. After Maghrib. Right? Yes.
Question. So you cannot free a slave, right? Somebody came up with a novel idea that there's a bird that is caged.
No, that's a pet. Yeah, a slave is a certain definition. If it's a slave, then the bird can do things for me. Bring me food, coffee, do other things that a slave would normally do, right? And then you would have to give it rights. You would have to give it clothes from the clothes that you would give your children, and food from the food that you would give your children. It's not possible. Yeah. How can an orphan be freed? No, you adopt an orphan, but that's not a slave. Yeah, yes. It would be people of need. Yeah, for that food. If I go to Beverly Hills and I give food to like Michael Jordan and all of the celebrities, that they're not masakin. Right? But it's possible somebody has money but they're miskin. Not rich, but like maybe they're like a regular worker. They have an income but they're not like wealthy. Right? And you can help them out with that food. So it's possible. Soup kitchen. Yeah. Yes. So you would tell them, I want to pay for 60 people to have a sizable plate of food. You tell them 60 people. A lot of organizations, they do this, like the Islamic organizations. They have online like a form that you can fill out for kafara. Okay? And kafara is for a lot of things, like for swearing, for a lot of other things that may not necessarily be due to fasting in and of itself. Okay? So for that reason, a lot of these organizations, they have a page that's dedicated to it. I think Islamic Relief has it. I think Ikna Relief too. So you can look at those websites too if you don't know like where to go for that kind of thing. You have to make it up. You still have to make up those days. Yes. Yeah.
Can you give it to Muslims or non-Muslims or only Muslims?
The priority is to Muslims. Because Muslims are supposed to look after the needs of their other Muslims first. At minimum, right? If there's no other Muslims, for example, maybe if they want to go and to give it, it's best local. So it's best local and the poor in our area. If I, for example, hear that there's no poor in our area, everything has been solved, and for example, down the road there's another, let's say East Brunswick, for example, I can call East Brunswick and tell them I want to pay kafara here and take care of the needs there, for example. Maybe let's say everybody's taken care of here. It might be something from your choice that you give it to people in Egypt or in Pakistan or something of the like as well. You can do so. Lakin the best is at home. Yeah.
During this life, let's say for something making wudu. The thing is, like when you wash your mouth,
Yeah.
and you spit out,
You do your best.
you do your best.
You do your best. The rest is Allah forgives. That's it. You just do your best.
And earlier you mentioned basically if any white liquid comes out your organ
Intentionally.
intentionally.
Intentionally. You have to do deliberate acts. Meaning, I sat and I watched my spouse, and I dreamed and I thought, khalas, like this is over now. You know?
What you mean there is ejaculation specifically.
Yes.
Not, for example, there's still, for example, weak amount of white liquid coming out. I would not think so.
Well, the white liquid with any sort of like if sperm comes out and you're imagining, thinking, lusting, all of those other things that have to do with it coming out, that breaks your fast. If it just comes out on its own, you haven't had anything that has to do with that, that's just ghusl. That has nothing to do with a woman or any kind of thing. That's a whole other situation. It happens to the male body too. Okay, this is part 1 of the introduction to Ramadan fiqh. Next week, we're going to do part 2, inshallah. We'll talk about other parts of Ramadan itself. We'll finish fasting. We'll talk about the 27th night. We'll talk about some of the fiqh behind tahajjud and so forth, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, and other common questions. Okay? And zakat al-fitr, bi'idhnillah. All right? Does anybody have any final questions before we close out on anything we talked about? All right, you guys have the recordings, right? So your job is to listen to the recording. Next week, I'm going to do 2 minutes. I'm just going to quiz you guys very quick. I'm going to ask you what breaks your fast, what doesn't break your fast, what's required from your fast, and what's not required from your fast. Inshallah. خلاص وصلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وإلى لقاء آخر إن شاء الله تعالى نستودعكم الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته